up nice and small, and we'll add that to right here on top of that. Looks good. Now we've got our flank steak marinating, and we're going to start the green beans. And what I'm doing here is, you can always just break off the tips of the green beans, but frankly for me that takes a little bit too much time. So what I'm doing is just take about a bunch at a time and just chop those ends off. You don't want those scraggly ends in there, so just kind of line them up and we'll just chop them right off. So easy. Green beans, these are just gonna, what we're gonna do is we're gonna steam them for about 5 to 6 minutes just till tender. And right now I am actually boiling the water, because there's nothing worse than waiting for water to boil. So that's one thing, one of my main tips is, if you're going to be using boiling water, start it before you do anything else, because waiting for it is at least one of my huge pet peeves. Same thing with pasta or other kinds of steamed vegetables. And putting these are of course washed and dried, and I'm just setting them right in my serving dish that we're going to be actually using to serve it, so we're not dirtying extra bowls. So that's another great advantage. And this here is about a pound of green beans, and that will serve certainly 6 people, possibly 6 to 8, depending on how big your portion size are. All right, sounds like that water is getting nice and hot, and I am almost done here. And if you really want to dress up this meal with, or the green beans in particular, you can add some toasted pine nuts. They're great, add a nice crunch to it. Got a funny little green bean there I'm not going to use. That's another good thing that when you're going through and chopping them. See how this one's kind of got brown? Probably don't want to use that one. So, you know, just be aware. You want to make a nice presentation. You want to have your green beans looking good for your guests. But as I was saying, to really dress up this meal, you can add some toasted pine nuts, or another thing is great thing to add is some toasted sliced almonds. Those add a great crunch and add some color and texture to the dish, which is always a nice thing to do. I love adding any kind of color and texture to a dish. Really dresses it up. So got lots of our green beans are almost done here. Got one more little batch. And the great thing about green beans is they're actually very inexpensive. This pound was probably less than $2, which is quite different than something like asparagus, which tends to be fairly expensive. So, and not to say I don't love asparagus, which I do, but if you're looking for a little more economical, or if you've got to serve a lot of people, you could go for the green beans, which are nice and typically nice and cheap. And they do have some different colored. They have purple and yellow. Those tend to be more expensive, about twice as much. But if you wanted to serve, you know, something really fancy and colorful, again, like I said, adding color and texture is always a goal of mine. If you want to do that, you can certainly get those, that one's brown. You can certainly get those other colored green beans. Okay, this looks fabulous. We've got these ready to go and are done with that. Easy cleanup. Now this may be hot, so I'm going to put my mitt on. That is boiling just perfectly. We'll just toss these green beans in there. Wonderful. And I'll need to make sure I set the timer so we don't overdo those. And it is on high heat. So let me set the timer. And then what we're going to do is move on, while that's still marinating, is move on to a couple different ways to serve the flank steak. And they're both really easy and very different. So I think you'll really enjoy it. So let me set the timer. So the first way I usually serve flank steak is with a horseradish sauce. And it's just kind of goes on the side. You can serve it and pass it around the table. Remember, always pass to the right. So I usually serve it with a horseradish sauce, which I'm going to make real quick here. And if you buy the hot horseradish sauce, which I do, what I then do is cut it with a little sour cream, because frankly, straight horseradish sauce can be a bit overwhelming, especially for people who aren't used to such, you know, that kind of heat. But I love horseradish, so I like to keep it a little, you know, on the spicy side. So we'll just mix that up, and depending on the number of guests, you could of course make more. I'll have a little taste of that. Wow, definitely got some bite. Cleared my sinuses. So that's ready to go. Is I'm gonna quarter some cherry tomatoes. Tomatoes go great with beef as well. I'm just gonna quickly quarter these tomatoes, and we're gonna toss it with some salt and pepper and some olive oil and a little bit of vinegar. And so it'll be kind of like this vinaigrette. It's gonna go right over the meat, and we're gonna put some blue cheese on there. And so you've got all these wonderful flavors. I love that. You get that type of garnish. I often serve the same thing on seared tuna steaks. I love the tomato kind of vinaigrette salsa. It's wonderful flavor. And blue cheese, like I said, is one of those flavors that goes great with beef, so that's why I'm throwing that in there. And this is just something I came up with on my own. I thought, you know what would go with flank steak? What would go with beef? You could do the same thing if you're just doing a steak or some other type of beef. Blue cheese, tomatoes are always great options. One other tip, just kind of kitchen tip if you're in the market for some new knives, is I really recommend a chef's knife, a paring knife, and also a bread knife. And when you're buying your chef's knife, I recently got this particular one for my birthday, and I just adore it. It has these grooves in it which create a little friction and prevent the food from sticking to the knife while you're cutting it, which can be a huge, huge help. So, and sharp, of course. We always want to make sure your knife is extremely sharp, especially when you're cutting things like tomatoes, because that skin is really hard to cut through with a dull knife. You just don't even want to go there. So, all right, we've got our tomatoes chopped, and I think I heard the timer go off, so I'm going to grab those green beans and make sure. Looks like they're ready to go. Oh, those look great. Let me just grab a fork and make sure it's nice and tender. Oh, those are perfect. See how the fork runs right through? These look good. A little too hot to taste, but I'm certain that they're all nice and tender. And a nice thing about vegetables, steamed vegetables, is not to overcook them. You don't want soggy vegetables. A little bit of crunch is very elegant, and that's what most fine restaurants shoot for. So let me grab this couple of pot holders. I love mint pot holders, by the way. It's my favorite. They're so easy to use. But let's go ahead and grab the mint pot holder, and what I'm going to do to drain this is simply put the lid over the top.